you have.
And thank you, Minister, for being in the Seanad today. I'm delighted we are finally getting the chance to debate this really important January report from the Joint Committee on Education and Skills, a report that I was delighted to contribute to along with other TDs and senators. Joe. Anyway, so I mean, for a number of reasons, I suppose as the mother of a child of school-going age who had to remove her from the classroom while particular agencies came in to give sex education, it was something that was really important to me. But also, you know, I've given talks over the years at in various different spaces on the role of sex-positive parenting and you know, teaching our children to be able to engage in negotiated positive sexual experiences without feeling a huge shadow of shame or guilt or like they're doing something wrong because of misinformation that they received in school. This report on reforms to relationships and sexuality education in Irish schools came about as a direct result of auxiliary recommendations 320 from the Special Joint Committee on the 8th Amendment, of which I was also a member, which called for a thorough review of this area in light of the clear and documented evidence presented to us that showed objective and factual sex education has a clear role in reducing rates of unintended and crisis pregnancies. I'm glad that this was the catalyst for our work, as it was very much placed our examination of sex ed reform within a human rights and reproductive rights framework, and which placed the best interests of children and students at its heart, a perspective I feel was reflected throughout our report and its recommendations. The Irish record on sex ed is poor, due to the widespread religious patronage and involvement of religious orders in the delivery of our state education system. Most historical sex ed experiences of people in Ireland were delivered with a Catholic ethos, which unfortunately was moralistic, inaccurate and with an unrealistic focus on zero tolerance abstinence. It can't be overstated just how important getting this area right is for our kids, our schools and the future of Irish society. Giving children factual, objective and complete information on how to manage their romantic and sexual relationships will determine how they approach these relationships and each other for their entire lives. As a result, our national policies and their implementation have to be robust, comprehensive and, insofar as possible, the same in every school in the country. In the report itself, we took a modular approach over 4 meetings in May to July 2018. It was written with the intention of supporting the review underway in the National Council for the Curriculum and Assessment, who conduct the detailed policy and curriculum work, and who I recognise published a draft report in this area before the summer. We took a broad perspective throughout the report of focusing on the importance of objective and factual information, independent of ethos of the school, and for age and developmentally appropriate methods to be used. We wanted to ensure that discussions of sex ed weren't just made in terms of risk and disease, but where a positive framing of sexual experiences would also be possible and encouraged. We also wanted to broaden the focus to be beyond just the biological aspects of sex ed, and also focus on the importance of psychosocial approaches where students wouldn't be just taught in solely biological terms about sex, but be taught to deal with issues like identifying abuse in a relationship, dealing with the breakup of a relationship or supporting a peer in a crisis. We made it clear that the connection with related mental health issues needed to be made, such as anxiety, body image, body dysmorphia, confidence, eating disorders and addiction, as well as also focusing on positive framings of good mental health. A consistent theme from witnesses was the need for sexual consent to form an integral part of all sex ed reforms, as well as inclusivity of all types of relationships, sexual orientations, gender identities within the curriculum. In addition, crucially, we heard strong evidence on school ethos being cited by schools as justification for not providing factual information or for delivering the curriculum outside of best practice. We also heard compelling testimony in relation to the sex ed needs of children and adults of those with intellectual disability, how they are often seen as eternal children devoid of sexuality, their rates of STI contraction, the massive the divide of sexuality, their rates of STI contraction and the massive inadequacies in their sex education currently. We made 24 really important recommendations to you, Minister, and the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment to inform reforms in this area. We made recommendations on curriculum reform, implementation and delivery, and broader whole-school approaches required to change the culture within our schools. In terms of curriculum reform, we recommended that the SPHE curriculum in place since 1999 was in need of significant change, and that a new curriculum was needed to reflect the significant changes that have taken place in this country over the last 20 years. We recommended that a new curriculum should be gender equality based, inclusive, holistic, creative, empowering and protective of children's interests and needs. We recommended that a purpose-built RSE model in teacher training to encourage specialisation and professionalisation of this area, and that those with an intellectual disability be included and represented and accounted for. To reflect the significant support for LGBT equality in the marriage referendum, our 8th recommendation reads that the curriculum should be fully inclusive of sexual orientation, gender identity and spectrums thereof, and those LGBT relationships should be represented without distinction as to their heterosexual counterparts. We also recommend that consent, pornography, reproductive health care form integral parts of the new curriculum. In terms of delivery of the subject and implementation of a new curriculum, we heard considerable evidence in this area. As many will be aware, many schools will contract external providers to come into the school to teach RSE. However, as we discovered, there is zero regulation by the Department of Education or the HSE of these providers or what they are teaching. Many of them are offshoots of religious orders and teach RSE with a Catholic ethos, leading to inaccurate and moralistic information being given to children. We need these external agencies to be well regulated and teaching to an agreed and standardised curriculum immediately, and the Department needs to step in on this. The report is also unfortunately out of date due to its publication 9 months ago, as we were not able to make recommendations in relation to the upcoming Department of Health scheme on free contraception and the need to provide long-acting contraceptives free of charge, as well as the PrEP programme plan to combat HIV and the need to make the drug available free of charge and in a community setting. We would of course endorse these 2 schemes, and Minister Harris should be commended for them. The other main recommendation in terms of implementation and delivery of a new and of current curriculums has been well debated and relates to how religious ethos of a school affects the content of delivery of RSE. As we were all aware, over 90% of state primary schools have a Catholic ethos, and in Catholic schools this ethos can serve as a real barrier to comprehensive and objective sex ed. Section 9 of the Education Act 1998 allows for the health education to be given to students having regard to a characteristic spirit of the school, which has been cited as giving schools the room to deliver religious perspectives on sex education at odds with agreed and international best practice. Our 14th recommendation in the report calls for the Education Act to be amended so that ethos can, quote, no longer be used as a barrier to effective, objective and factual teaching of the RSE and SPHE curriculum to which every student is entitled, end of quote. We then go on to call for these legislative amendments to be made by the end of 2019, so within 3 months from now. I know from the autumn legislative schedule, Minister, that there is no primary legislation signposted for this area. Therefore, I have to ask, what is the progress that you and your department have made in implementing this recommendation for our committee? I also note that you are blocking a bill from Deputy Coppinger with the express aim of making the legislative amendments that we call for, with an extremely dubious example of the need for a money message. If you do not have your own primary legislation, how can you continue to justify blocking this private member's bill, which already has cross-party support in the Dáil? The idea that curriculum reform in this area would incur a cost on the Exchequer when the NCCA is already doing that exact body of work through funds already appropriated by the Dáil is just indefensible. I would hope that you will be allowing that bill to proceed to committee stage before the Christmas break, Minister. Children in schools across the country deserve a standardised and objective experience of the new RSE curriculum, one that is largely similar to that taught at the school down the road. Until the Education Act is amended, this is simply not possible, and as legislators we have a pressing responsibility to ensure it is. The report is really important, Minister. It's progressive and radical in its scope for the future of sex ed for Irish children. Sexual education isn't just a class in school. It's part of realising one's own identity and how we can relate to each other. It has a role to play in tackling gender equality and sexual assault and so many other areas. I'd like to thank our committee and the witnesses who contributed, and I hope that you are taking it seriously in the department, and I look forward to seeing its implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator